Now we got a microphone. Okay, we're going to start this one over again. All right, so now we got you. All right, so I'm going to start over real quick for you. I'm News 6 meteorologist Samara Kokinas here to bring you an update on Tropical Storm Ian. We do have the 5 o'clock advisory in with the new track. So what we're looking at tonight is imagery. So you see all of this imagery. Basically, what's going to happen with Ian, it's currently moving westward. So it's going to continue that through tonight. And then what we're eventually going to see is a northwest turn on Sunday. So it will pass by to the south and west of Jamaica tonight. And can everybody still hear me now? That was about a minute ago. You guys are good? Brenda, we're good on audio? Okay, good. All right. So, and then it'll eventually move toward the Caymans where we are expecting it to rapidly intensify. So let's get over to this model data. This is the 5 p.m. advisory. Winds are at 45 miles per hour with gusts up near 60 miles per hour. Still moving west at 16 miles per hour. So thank you, Cassie. I appreciate your help. The pressure is about 1,003 millibars, but watch this, okay? We've been noticing a general westward trend with each model output that comes out with this track. So as we put this in motion, notice it'll continue over the next 24 hours or so to move to the west and then eventually taking a northwest turn before it makes a northward turn. I'm going to stop it right here because you'll notice that as it gets closer to Cuba, it does rapidly intensify to possibly a Category 2 hurricane. Now, we are expecting with those really, really warm tropical waters there for this to happen. So the thing about this system is as it moves into that favorable environment of those deeper, warmer waters, we're definitely going to see this system grow even more, especially after it gets past Cuba. So what we're looking for here is we're going to put this back in motion here so you can see it a little bit better. There, after about Tuesday afternoon, after it moves just over western Cuba, what happens is it starts to rapidly intensify even more because this area, the water temperatures are very, very warm and the environment is very conducive for this to happen. So when we put this back in motion, you'll notice that as it continues its track, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit tighter on this track so you guys can see it a little bit better in just a few minutes here, but you'll notice that at the end of the forecast period, it does show a little bit of weakening. And the reason for that is because of the wind shear that is over the northern half of the Gulf of Mexico. So what's that wind shear is actually going to be very favorable to kind of knock things down a little bit. But still, you'll notice that this particular track guidance, as it continues to get closer to Florida, still has all of Central Florida and the Panhandle for the majority of it, with the exception of Miami-Dade County there in that cone. So it's still a very broad cone, which means, yes, there's still a lot of uncertainty as to where this will go. The thing about it is I don't want you guys to pay attention to the center of this track because of the fact that this system, the center of the system, could actually ride the western half of that line, or it could ride the eastern half of that line. So it'll definitely be something that we'll be watching over the next couple of days, because by about Monday, that's when we're really going to start to see a better consensus of exactly better model data will be coming in for a lot of the models to kind of get a little bit tighter, especially our spaghetti models, which I'll show you in just a minute as well. But as the hurricane hunters continue to go into this storm, which they have a big schedule ahead of them. They're going to be very busy. It's going to get more and more data in addition to balloon data that we're going to be seeing coming in as well. So all of that data kind of helps the computer models really get a better grasp as to exactly what this system is going to be doing. Plus, as the system moves into the Gulf of Mexico, we have different steering currents that are going to kind of have a potential to drive this system versus while it's in the Caribbean. So let's take a look here at the satellite imagery so you can see the latest satellite imagery with it. So they're kind of the models are starting to, with the data coming in from the hurricane hunters, which there is one in progress right now, is basically helping to lock in better a center of location. So you'll notice that a lot of that wind shear, when you're looking at this particular system, is starting to kind of ramp up a little bit more. It's moving moving into more favorable conditions. So not as much wind shear, which we're starting to see that convection kind of building up in this particular system. And that's really what's going to give it its power over the next couple of days as well. So here's a better look. Again, we're going to zoom in tight in just a minute, but you'll notice that it does move to the south and west of Jamaica. And the thing about it is they could potentially see tropical storm impacts there. Rain for Jamaica and Cuba is estimated between 4 to 8 inches, with isolated maximums up near 12 inches. So basically, as that system continues to make its way closer to Cuba, you'll notice that it potentially rapidly intensifies to a Category 3 just offshore, and then it continues to strengthen from there. So by Tuesday afternoon, we could be looking at a Category 4 hurricane, major hurricane status here. So, but when you look at this system as a whole, you'll notice that that track, I'm going to back it up a little bit, it's very, very narrow. And that's because all of the model data in that short period of time is definitely kind of locked in a little bit tighter to the current information that it has from all of the recon flights that have been happening, and it's able to grasp exactly what this system is doing. You'll notice as we progress the system, the cone gets bigger. That's like basically we're heading into that area where we have the potential to see a lot of bouncing around, a wobble effect that we talk about a lot. And we also see differences in model data a lot too. That spread gets wider. And if you have a wide spread like that, there's a lot of possibility of things that could happen during that forecast time. The farther out that data is, the bigger the possibility is. But once we start to get more and more data in on this particular storm, especially as it gains more momentum and moves into the southern Gulf, basically what's going to happen from there is you'll notice that cone starts to shrink. And if you've lived here for any period of time, we always show that cone starting to shrink a little bit more as it gets closer to the arrival. So looking at that potential, though, I mean, when we talk about, these warm Gulf waters, it can really cause a system to rapidly intensify to that point of just, a really big storm. Now, when we zoom in a little bit more here, you'll notice it goes by Thursday afternoon, it starts to weaken a little bit, and that was that area of shear that I was telling you about. So the thing about it is, again, don't pay attention to the center of the track, folks. I really want you to be aware of that, the fact that it's going to shift back and forth a lot, and we've seen that trend over just even in the past 24 hours. So let me show you the model data. Notice that it's very, very tight, going all the way at least by Cuba. Then after that, it starts to spread out a little bit. And the spread has had a lot of people worried, but at the same rate, what we're looking at again is the model data just kind of starting to come together a little bit better, and we'll start to see it really come together over the next 24 to 48 hours. So by Monday, we'll have a better idea of exactly the type of impacts that we could potentially see based on a better track information as to where that system could be going. So when we look at the range of these particular models, notice that a lot of the models are continuing that westward trend, which is fortunately for us a better output, but not so great for Alabama as well as the Panhandle. So, but you'll also notice that the European models, a lot of people have been watching the GFS and the European models. That European track just about a day ago was over South Florida. And now it's continuing to also shift back to the west too. So kind of bringing it a little bit closer to Central Florida, whereas the GFS has had a tendency to roll through the Panhandle and going up toward Alabama as well. So again, this will be something that when we get more and more data in, these models will be a lot more concise, and you'll start to notice that they start to kind of come together and look more like a telephone cord versus of a plate of spaghetti, like what we call them. Looking like. So when we talk about steering patterns, we're talking about that upper level trough. So when we take a look at this particular system, when Ian is in the Caribbean, what's going to happen is as it moves closer to Cuba, this upper level trough is basically going to pick it up eventually and make its way toward the north. So that's what's going to actually pull the system to the north. Now, when you'll notice that it starts to skirt across the mid-Atlantic, this is basically where a lot of where it could really impact us the most, basically, in determining where it's going to go. So it depends on how fast this particular trough is and how strong it is, whether or not it's going to drag it closer to the east, to the west coast of Florida and bring it to the east, or if it's actually going to drive it a little bit further north. And basically what we're going to be watching for very closely is how soon that Ian starts to make that northwest to north turn. So the longer it stays west, the more of a westward track it would take. And the quicker that it actually moves to the northwest means basically more of an eastward path. So that's why we're seeing that bounce between the models. But this is that steering current. When I told you that once it moves out of the Caribbean and into the Gulf of Mexico, there's going to be different steering currents that will drive this system. That's what I'm talking about. So definitely something we're going to be watching really, really closely over the next couple of days, especially with more model data coming in. And we have seen quite a bit of activity already with the NOAA hurricane hunters as well as the U.S. Air Force. These reconnaissance flights basically have been going on all day in different time periods. The last one was at 1:30 this afternoon. And then we also have one in progress now with the NOAA 43 planes. So basically, all of this data is going to help us really start to solidify and help the computer models generate better information for better model data, which will result in a better forecast track like what we just showed you. I'm going to turn my face off here so you can, there we go, the NOAA 43 plane. I didn't realize it was blocking it. But basically, we can't rule out impacts here in Central Florida. Of course, that westward trend is definitely something that is favorable for us, but not as favorable for the Panhandle as well as Alabama. But again, with that forecast cone being so large in the end result of it, that 4 to 5 day period, we're talking about Wednesday going into Thursday, when that spread is so large, we can't completely rule out a lot of the impacts here, because again, it can happen anywhere within that cone, not just on the center track. So here was one of the flights from, I believe this was 1:30 this afternoon, and you can see they're basically gathering data with the environment, trying to find that central pressure, which they found at about 1,007 millibars at that point in time. So all of this data, as it continues to come in, of course, aiding computer models to give us a better look. And I'm going to go back here to this cone again, just to show you how big the end result of that cone is. So before I get to some questions here, because I do notice there's some questions happening, and I will get to you guys in just a second. I was just kind of getting through this information until I get to those questions. So, but notice how broad that cone is on the output. So notice Miami-Dade really not in that, but the majority of Florida is at that point. So let me look at some questions over here. I have a lot of windows open, so bear with me here. I'm going to turn this back on. Well, where'd it go? There it is. Okay. All right, Zach is on the Facebook live chat, and he said, what will be the condition if it does hit Florida? Basically, what we're looking at is we'll have a better idea of what our exact impacts are going to be, Zach, by about Monday, because it's still pretty early to determine that. But of course, along the west coast of Florida, we could definitely see some impacts from storm surge, and of course, an increased amount of rain and possibly some wind. But if the storm continues on that westward trend, and the core of that system stays further west, that means the more powerful winds near that core are going to stay farther away from us. So again, that'll be something that we'll have a better grasp on come Monday, when we start to see, again, more consistent model data coming in. So let's see. just scrolling through some of these. Will Mississippi be involved since it's shifting west? We can't rule out, the possibility in that extended forecast, because it is so far out at this point, of Mississippi being impacted by it as well, and Alabama as well as the Panhandle too. So I know a lot of people have been concerned with that shift back to the west, whether or not it's going to head back toward Louisiana or whatever the case is at this point. But again, that's still pretty far out in the forecast to really determine, but we can't completely rule it out either. So I hope that helps you. Let's see. Who else do we have here? And with land. Give me a second. Yeah, that drop in the 4 from the category 4 to the 2 is a good indicator of that wind shear that we were talking about over the northern Gulf. That will help kind of knock it down a little bit, taking a little bit of that steam off. Hurricane Michael, a lot of people are thinking that this is going to be a very similar situation. However, the thing about Michael is it didn't really have a steering system, so it just kind of drove right in there pretty quickly, and it was very strong actually. So definitely that was something that that's something that we have going for us, is that wind shear to kind of tear things down just a little bit. These keep moving pretty quickly here. Can it shift back to the east? There will be a wobble. So yeah, there is the potential for that to happen, where we start to see it shift a little bit back to the east and then some back to the west. So we can't completely rule that out either. We've seen a pretty big shift just in the last 24 hours. And we've also seen it go back toward the east coast and then back to the west. So, or rather shifting east and then shifting west, not coast, but basically. So yeah, we could still see it kind of jog a little bit closer to the east coast to the east here. I need another energy drink at this point, or coffee or something. But that's the reason why all of Central Florida is not out of the cone yet too. So, and that includes the west coast of Florida too. Naples, Fort Myers still in that potential to see some impacts. Even the Keys in South Florida could get up to about 1 to 3 inches of rainfall with isolated maximums up near 5 inches. So if you're inquiring about the Keys, I know some people have been asking about the Keys if they'll feel some impacts. That's a rain outlook, and they could also potentially feel some of the wind. The western and central portions of Cuba could get anywhere between 6 to 10 inches of rain with an isolated maximum up near 14 inches of rainfall, which could cause some really bad flooding in that particular area, as well as those really damaging winds that will be accompanying that rapidly intensifying storm. So, and again, Jamaica and the Caymans, anywhere between 4 and 8 inches of rain, and isolated maximums up near 12 inches of rain. So let's see who else. Matthew, no, it's not going to hit Jamaica. It's going to stay to the south and west of it as it passes by tomorrow. And going into tomorrow night, they'll start to feel the impacts there. There's tropical storm warnings in Jamaica right now. And the Caymans, tomorrow night going into Monday is when they're expected to feel the impacts. What can happen in Jamaica? It really depends on exactly where this system makes landfall to determine or where it's headed at this point. This is a question from Gabriel on the YouTube live. It says, what can happen in Jacksonville? It really depends on, when the system makes landfall, where it could happen. So you'll notice that cone again showing all of the west coast of Florida for the most part, with the exception of the most extreme southern half. But the thing about it is when this storm makes landfall, it kind of tells us the quadrants that you're in. You've heard us talking about the dirty side of the storm. So basically we have quadrants. There's 4 of them. And when you look at a storm as a whole, the top right quadrant is really the nastiest side of that storm. So if the storm moves in and it comes across central Florida, closer to Orlando, the impacts would definitely be different depending on the path that it took and whatnot. It would determine exactly what could happen in Jacksonville. If it moves right over top of Jacksonville or if it moves to the west of Jacksonville, it all would vary at that point how far away the system is and at what kind of strength that it has by the time it reaches the East Coast, just because it will be interacting with land and kind of losing a little bit of its steam. But again, remember, I know a lot of people have a tendency, including my family, to say, oh, it's just a little tropical storm. A tropical storm can still bring a very large amount of flooding and damage to an area. So always just kind of be prepared. I don't want anybody to be frantic about the situation, but when we're on a beautiful weekend like we are, we could use this time to kind of prep our homes and get our stuff to kind of together. That way you're not doing this at the last minute, and luckily we still have a few days, several days actually, because we're talking about a Wednesday night going into Thursday as it approaches the West Coast now. So we'll probably start to feel those impacts and stuff by about Tuesday night, possibly going into Wednesday at this point. Let's see. Tucker, if Ian cut somewhere more southern and moved east, could the Carolinas be affected? It's possible, but a lot of the model data hasn't gone out that far to really show the implications on the Carolinas just yet. But, with any storm that has moved in from the west and gone to the north and east, we've seen impacts to the Carolinas before, especially along the coastline. So we can't rule that out either. But as far as the cone is concerned right now, the majority of Florida is in that cone, as well as southern Georgia and southern Alabama and the Panhandle. So let's see. See a few more questions before I head out of here. Adrian Baker, could Orlando get impacted? Yes, we're still in that potential to see some impacts here, but of course we'll have a better idea coming into Monday exactly what our impacts will be based on better model data that will be coming in. It'll be a little bit more concise for us to go off of to tell you exactly what those impacts will be. And that's correct. Steve Hanna said everyone should remember, depending on where this system makes landfall, it will determine, exactly how much if we are that we are in the dirty side of the storm. So when we're talking about the dirty side of the storm, talking about the right hand side of it being the area where we see the most tornadic activity and really strong winds. And a lot of rain as well. But when we're talking about which side of the storm we're going to be on, it depends on how far west this particular system moves to. So, of course, a more westward path would take it a little bit more out of central Florida for us. So that would be a better scenario. But like I said, if you have family and friends in the Panhandle as well as Alabama, that wouldn't be an ideal situation for them. Here, let's break this down for you again here and show you a better view. You can see that into that cone there going into Thursday afternoon, still very broad at this point. So, just doing those basic preps, getting a little bit of extra water, stuff like that. I don't want you to panic buy anything, but always being prepared is the best situation. Let's see. All right, guys. So we have another update, of course, an intermediate update, which is not a track update, coming in at 8 o'clock tonight. That's going to be an advisory. The next track update will come tonight at 11 o'clock. And, of course, we'll bring you more information throughout the evening. I will be back tonight, I believe. Brenda, am I on again at 8? Okay, so a little bit after 8 o'clock tonight, I'll be back with another update. And then again at 10:30 tonight. So, of course, 10:30 will not have the 11 o'clock track update, but we will have that update coming up on News 6 at 11. And we also have a show at 7 that could be interrupted briefly by football. We'll definitely be following football at 7 to bring you all of the latest information that we have coming into the studio. So for now, I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you so much for joining us. And like I said, we'll be bringing you all this information as we get it in, and I'll be back at a little bit after 8 o'clock with another update.